Rolf is often compelled to engage with materials physically, either by imprinting, folding, crumpling. And within his painting, it's very much a language of gesture and traces.
Most paintings I do, I paint with my fingers. And you can't bring over that much emotion with a brush.
What's very interesting to me is that when Rolf started painting, he used cans. He used these big aluminium cans that were very much still in the world of objects. And he started making these gestures, woof and oomph. It's a very physical act.
It also has something to do with the aesthetic of chance, of luck. You don't know how things will come out. A lot of big canvases, I nearly paint with my eyes closed.
When you come into a studio, the first experience is almost of overwhelmed chaos. It's not only a decorative thing, it's not only a gesture to inhabit the studio, it's actually an integral part of his process. It's almost like a physical mind map. He takes these objects that are utilitarian, that might have traces of life, and then they become an active member in these collages he makes. And a lot of these objects also have a bit of a hybrid status. Like, he really doesn't create much of a hierarchy between sculpture, work per se, and things that he might have got in a flea market. There's this idea of almost this erotic friction that happens between different objects that come together, different materials, hot and cold and rough and smooth, and what happens when two things collide, what kind of alchemy happens. I think when coming back to surrealism, one thing that is also important to their practice is the idea of chance, the sweet little fine line between faire et laisser faire. One of the objects that I love the most is the simple gesture of Sisyphus. There's a lot of his conceptual thinking. You put a hole in a spade and you make it a metonymy of this, Greek myth. Rolf is this dynamic person that often is in movement in his practice, in his photography, in his gesture, in this idea of moving the camera, moving his painting. But yet, actually, in this room, there's a totally different side to Rolf's practice, which is the one of almost making noble something that is ephemeral. These 4 vitrines are absolutely wonderful because they're 4 boxes in which he's put materials that are often connected with the barn, agricultural life, and made them into almost this museified, polyptic, almost like an abstract painting. So here you have cow dung, which is almost this kind of Dada take on what bullshit that's been framed. And here you have this wool, and it has this very haptic presence. This is the hay, which again, it recalls, there's a lot of synesthesia in his practice. And then, for example, this, which I find absolutely beautiful, I had never seen it in the flesh, so to speak. This branch scaled up, where he takes again something that is of nature and makes it noble by casting it into bronze. And this is a real strategy that Rolf turns to again and again, which is to cast into other materials, shifting our gaze through the physical presence. In this case, something that is probably discarded on the side of a road becomes something really noble. Rolf is very much interested in what makes us human, and one of the things he often tries to portray in his work is the idea of character. And in this room, we're surrounded by different iterations of the Orgenglaris chair, which was a chair that populated his childhood, the typical bureaucratic chair that was made in Switzerland. And he thought it might be a good blank canvas for which to start experimenting not only with form, but also with function, with scale, with materiality. And so it became almost like an obsession of his. From 1992 to all the way to now, he's been re-editing this chair, casting it into slate, silicone, wax, making it into a 6 meter, putting it in a box, hanging it from the rafters. And for him, the chair, which is intimately linked to the human body, is a vector through which to talk about character. And so even in some of the titles, you have this idea of character. I mean, this is one of his most recent Orgenglaris. It's called be-rühren, which in German means glum. And he's sort of almost like a fetal, put it in this kind of box that it's compressed, and it becomes very much an expression of human emotion. It's important to know that with Rolf, the body is not the end. It's often a vector through which to then talk about emotions or try and transcend beyond the physical into something slightly more spiritual. And I really love this chair, which is called chip on the shoulder. For me, chip on the shoulder expresses being weighed down by something. And in this case, the chair is dwarfed and it's weighed by a 70-kilo block of granite. And what I love about this series of work is that it's very much neither figurative nor abstract. These are all things that are intangible, yet we associate to specific objects. And I think in that case, I can sort of say that his practice in its many forms, in its many disciplines, is a bit of a character study. It's discrete but sustained exploration in what it is that makes us human.